Hey, I made my own EDC2 bag based on Adam Savage's plans that he sold. I've got a few tips and one little secret that I'll share right now. Thanks, Birdie. When you're making the EDC2, according to the instructions, you're just supposed to get loose zipper. But I found a 22 inch, it calls for 21 inch, but I found a 22 inch purse zipper at I think Joann's, but they might have it at other places. So that's the first tip: is you can use a pre-made zipper, and I was actually able to do the whole thing without having to take it all apart or anything. So I just used it as is, which saved me a little bit of time stitching it up. Oh, I've got some stuff in there. This is some of my little crochet projects. I'm in the middle of one. Right. Tip two: the loops that you do, you're supposed to stitch them kind of in between the outer bag or the main bag and the zipper. I wish I had made the loops actually extend down to this lower stitch of the lining that holds the rods. It's not that it doesn't feel like it'll hold, but I feel like it would hold a lot better. I haven't used these shoulder straps. Also, these shoulder straps are a little long, so don't read too much into that. I made this from a lot of scrap material, so it has more seams in it than you would have in the normal bag, and that leads into my tip number three, and that is top stitching. I did a little bit of top stitching where they said to on the sides based on Adam Savage's plans, and I did a little bit on the inside there. This is on the lining, again, scrap material, but I didn't do it on all the seams, and I wish I had. The top stitching, I think, really has reinforced it, makes it a lot nicer. I used a contrasting thread here, but you obviously don't have to do that. I was doing that more just so I could kind of see it and be able to go back and remember how I did the stitching. Another tip is the plastic base that you're supposed to use on this. It's got a size in the plans. They never really say when to put that in, but I found it easiest when you're starting to stitch up the sides, stitching all the sides together. Before you do that, put in the plastic base so that it goes between this outer, in this case black, bottom section and the main, in this case white section. So that makes it good, and then it's not between the lining and the main bag. It's between the main bag and the bottom, and so I feel like it won't tear up the lining or come loose and bounce around in there because the lining isn't stitched anywhere at the bottom. Tip five: these rods that are in the top of the bag, you can't really see them, but I've got a couple over here that I bent. So this is with 1/8 inch rod that I just got at I think Home Depot, and then this is 3/16 inch rod. They never really specify the size of the rod you're supposed to use. For this bag, since it's just for really light usage, it's not a heavy duty tool bag, there's nothing really too sharp in there, it's yarn. I'm gonna use the 1/8 inch. I made up everything with the 3/16. It just feels a little too thick. It feels like it'd be too sturdy. I don't know if that's really a problem, but I think I'll save this for a heavier fabric. For this lighter fabric, I wouldn't want it to tear through it, and so the 1/8 inch is fine. It's pretty easy to bend. Obviously, the 3/16 a little bit harder to bend. And I guess tip 5.5 would be, what are the sizes here? So for these, it's I used 2.5 by 11.5 by 2.5 on the ends there, and tried to get them pretty even. You can see it's not quite flat. I can bend those to flatten them out a little bit, but that's not exactly the measurements on the bag. But that starts to lead into the secret. And I guess tip 5 3/4 is how you cut these. I used a Dremel. I used the cutting disc to cut them off, and then I used the little grinder to round out all of the corners. So that made it nice and smooth, or at least much duller, so that it won't poke through the bag. That's how I did it, and I just bent them with a clamp. I guess that'd be 5 6/8. I'm not really sure what tip we're up to around the rods, but Yeah, there you go. So what's the secret? Well, the secret that they don't tell you in any of the videos that you watch is something I think is kind of confusing based on what they do tell you. So at the very beginning of the videos that I found on making an EDC2, they talk about the plans and how you need to glue them down to something sturdy because, you know, if you're going to use them over and over again, that makes sense. But they make it sound like, oh, you don't want to mess these plans up, and they'd be very hard to reproduce. And, you know, even if you bought the digital ones, yeah, you can print off more, but you know, it's going to be kind of a pain. So once you've got them, you should be very careful with them and glue them down, make sure they're very sturdy. The secret is all those shapes are basically rectangles, and all of the rectangles are exactly even measurements. And so I'm not going to say what the measurements are because I don't know if that violates the terms of use of getting them. But imagine, like, okay, the plans are the bag is exactly 6 inches wide, or the piece of material you use to make the bag is 6 inches wide by 4 inches wide. Well, that's not, like, it's a rectangle. It's not really that hard to make. Oh, I messed up the plans. Well, I can make another rectangle that's 6 inches by 4 inches out of a piece of paper, and that'll be my new plan. So the secret is, when you get the plans, take measurements of them, write those measurements on the plans, and then if you ever mess them up, you've got an easy way to remake them because they're all very evenly distributed. There's not some sort of special, you know, it's, I'm going to make up numbers, 12 and, 1/8 by, 20 and 3/16. It's like, it's not these kind of like, well, they're kind of weird measurements. And then the seam allowances and stuff, and like the seam allowances are all pretty typical. So yes, take care of your plans, especially if you're going to make several of these. This is just my first one, like I said, out of scrap material. I'm going to probably make some more as I think of other good uses for them. And I'll probably use other material, heavier grade material, and I'll reuse the same paper plans I have. But if I ever mess them up, I've got the measurements. I can quickly cut out a piece of paper that's the right size. It's whatever it's like even numbers of inches in pretty much all directions. And there's a couple of caveats to that, but most of them are really even amounts. So that's the secret, is that the plans aren't that distinct, or at least they're not super fine adjustments that you wouldn't be able to reproduce if you just had the numbers. So keep that in mind if you get these plans. You don't need to treat the plans as some sort of ultra valuable thing that you can never replace. But so what do you think of the EDC2? Do you like it? Do you think it would work in your use cases? Have you made one? Link below in the comments. Let me know. Send me feedback on maybe what material you'd suggest making it out of. Where you think I might get some better loops. What other stuff? Again, this is found material, so keep that in mind. Like and subscribe. I really appreciate more subscribers right now. I'm trying to get breaking that 1,000. And as of this filming, it's way below that. So could use some more. Subscribe. Don't worry about that bell thing. I don't care. Just help me get my subscriber count up. And have a good one.